Vincent Chambers stared out the airplane window as Los Angeles came into view below. The city stretched out like a carpet of lights even in the afternoon sun. He rubbed his tired eyes and checked his watch. 2 in the afternoon. He wasn't supposed to be here yet. The business deal in Tokyo had wrapped up faster than anyone expected. 3 days faster, to be exact. Vincent had spent the last 12 hours on planes thinking about his own bed, his own shower, and maybe just doing nothing for a whole weekend. At 42 years old and worth more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, he rarely gave himself permission to just stop. The tech company he'd built from nothing had consumed 20 years of his life. Now it practically ran itself, but old habits died hard. He still traveled constantly, still checked emails at midnight, still felt guilty about taking time off. His therapist kept telling him to slow down. His doctor had said the same thing at his last checkup. But here he was, already planning Monday's meetings while the plane hadn't even landed yet. "Mr. Chambers, we'll have you home within the hour," his driver Michael said as Vincent slid into the back of the black Mercedes. Michael had been driving him for 8 years and knew better than to make small talk when Vincent looked this exhausted. The drive from the airport to Beverly Hills usually annoyed Vincent with its traffic and delays. Today, though, he felt himself relaxing into the leather seat. He'd sent a quick text to his assistant letting her know he was back early. But he hadn't told anyone else. No meetings to rush to. No dinners to attend. Just home. His mansion sat at the end of a quiet street where every house cost more than most people would earn in several lifetimes. Vincent had bought it 5 years ago, right after his company went public. 15 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, a pool, a tennis court, and more space than one person could ever need. His ex-wife had picked it out during their brief marriage. After the divorce, he'd almost sold it, but somehow never got around to it. Now it was just where he slept between trips. As Michael turned onto his street, Vincent noticed something odd. Cars lined both sides of his driveway. A beat-up Honda, an older Toyota, a white van that had seen better days. He sat up straighter. "That's strange," Michael said, slowing down. "Were you expecting guests, sir?" "No," Vincent said, his mind racing. "No, I wasn't." His heart started beating faster. Had something happened? A break-in? But these cars looked too ordinary for that. And why would criminals park right in the driveway? Maybe his assistant had scheduled something and forgotten to tell him. But that didn't make sense either. "Should I call the police?" Michael asked, his hand already reaching for his phone. "No, wait, just let me see what this is first." Vincent got out of the car before it fully stopped. He walked toward his front door, noticing the gate had been left open. The house looked normal from outside. No broken windows. No signs of anything wrong. Then he heard it. Voices. Multiple voices coming from inside his house. And laughter. Someone was laughing in his living room. Vincent's hand hovered over the doorknob. Part of him wanted to burst in and demand answers. But another part, the careful part that had built a successful business, told him to understand the situation first. He pulled out his key and quietly unlocked the door. The foyer was empty. Clean and exactly as he'd left it 3 weeks ago. But the voices were louder now, coming from the direction of his living room. He could hear someone speaking Spanish, then English, then Spanish again. It sounded like a teaching. Vincent moved slowly through his hallway, staying close to the wall. His expensive shoes barely made a sound on the marble floor. As he got closer to the living room, the voices became clearer. "Okay, now repeat after me. I am going to the store. I am going to the store." A chorus of voices repeated the phrase, some confident, some hesitant. Vincent recognized that first voice. It was Lucia, his housekeeper. She'd worked for him for 5 years. Always quiet. Always efficient. What was she doing? He reached the entrance to the living room and stopped dead in his tracks. The sight before him made no sense at all. His massive living room, where he usually just walked through on his way to somewhere else, had been completely transformed. The expensive furniture he'd never really cared about had been pushed carefully against the walls. In its place sat rows of folding chairs, the cheap metal kind you'd see at a community center. And in those chairs sat about 15 people, all watching Lucia like students in a classroom. Lucia stood near his fireplace using a large whiteboard that definitely wasn't there when he'd left. She was writing English sentences in neat handwriting, explaining something about verb tenses. His books from the study were stacked on his glass coffee table, next to piles of notebooks and pencils. His expensive Persian rug had been rolled up and moved to protect it. Vincent just stood there hidden in the doorway, trying to process what he was seeing. These weren't intruders. They were students, regular people wearing work uniforms. He recognized some of them from the neighborhood. The guy who mowed lawns 3 houses down. The woman who cleaned for the Petersons next door. A young man in a fast food uniform with a name tag still pinned to his shirt. They were all focused on Lucia, who was teaching with such passion and energy that Vincent had never seen in her before. In his house, she barely spoke unless spoken to, always keeping her head down, always moving efficiently from one task to another. But here teaching, she seemed like a completely different person, confident, alive, happy. Now this is very important for the citizenship test, Lucia was saying. You need to know these verb forms. So let's practice. Maria, can you make a sentence using the future tense? A woman in her 50s wearing a housekeeper's uniform stood up nervously. I will become an American citizen? The class erupted in applause and encouraging words. Lucia beamed. Perfect, yes. That's exactly right. Vincent felt something tight in his chest. These people were using his home as a school, without his permission, without him even knowing. For months probably, every time he traveled, which was constantly, Lucia had been doing this. He should be angry. This was his house, his private space. She'd betrayed his trust, used his belongings, brought strangers into his home. Any other employer would fire her on the spot. Probably press charges too. But as he watched this woman he barely knew teaching people who desperately wanted to learn, Vincent couldn't find the anger he expected to feel. Instead, something else was building inside him. Something he couldn't quite name yet. He stepped into the doorway. The movement caught someone's eye and suddenly everyone froze. Notebooks slipped from hands. Someone gasped. The room went completely silent. Lucia turned around and saw him standing there. The color drained from her face. The whiteboard marker fell from her hand and clattered on the hardwood floor. Mr. Chambers, she whispered. You're home. The silence in the room felt heavy, like everyone had forgotten how to breathe. Vincent watched as 15 pairs of eyes stared at him with pure fear. These people looked terrified, and he realized with an uncomfortable jolt that he was the reason why. Lucia's hands were shaking. She bent down to pick up the marker she'd dropped, but her fingers fumbled and it rolled away. A younger woman sitting in the front row started gathering her notebook quickly, stuffing it into a worn backpack. Wait, Vincent said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. Everyone froze again. Nobody move. I need to understand what's happening here. The man in the fast food uniform stood up slowly. Sir, this is not their fault. Lucia was just helping us. Please don't call the police. Police? Vincent hadn't even thought about police. He looked around the room again, really seeing these people for the first time. They weren't criminals. They were just working people, some still in their uniforms from whatever jobs they'd come from. A few were older, maybe in their 60s. One woman was holding a small child who couldn't have been more than 3 years old. I'm not calling the police, Vincent said, and he saw several shoulders relax slightly. But someone needs to explain to me what's going on. Lucia? Lucia looked like she might cry, but she stood up straighter, meeting his eyes. Mr. Chambers, I know this looks bad. I know I should have never done this. This is your home, and I had no right. Her accent was thicker than usual, her words tumbling out fast. I will pack my things and leave right now. I'm so sorry. So sorry. That's not what I asked, Vincent said, walking further into the room. People shifted nervously in their chairs. I asked what's going on. How long has this been happening? Lucia took a deep breath. 6 months. Every time you travel, which is about 3 times a month. I've been doing this. Only when you're away. I always make sure everything is back to normal before you return. I've been so careful. Her voice cracked. Until today. 6 months? Vincent felt stunned. He traveled constantly. That meant this had happened dozens of times right under his nose. And you're teaching? English? English, yes. And citizenship test preparation. And sometimes basic math and computer skills. Lucia gestured to the whiteboard behind her. Many people in our community, they work so hard. 2 jobs, sometimes 3, but they can't afford classes. The community college costs money. The private classes cost even more. And without English, without citizenship, they stay stuck in the same place forever. An older man in the back row spoke up, his voice quiet. I've been in this country 30 years. I work 6 days a week as a gardener, but I can't read the signs at my grandson's school. I can't help him with his homework. I feel ashamed," a woman added. "I clean houses 12 hours a day, good houses like this one, but I want to do more. Maybe work in an office someday, but nobody will hire me because my English is not good." Vincent listened, and with each story that tight feeling in his chest grew stronger. These weren't people trying to take advantage. These were people trying to improve their lives the only way they knew how. "So you just decided to use my house as a school?" Vincent asked Lucia, and he heard how harsh it sounded. "Without asking?" Lucia's eyes filled with tears. "I know it was wrong, but Mr. Chambers, you're never here. This beautiful house, all these rooms, all these books that nobody reads, and there are people outside who are desperate to learn. I thought maybe just once a week wouldn't hurt anybody." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I was wrong. It was stealing in a way. Stealing your space, your time, your trust. I understand if you want to fire me. I would fire me too." Vincent walked over to the coffee table where his books were stacked. He picked one up. It was an English grammar textbook he'd bought years ago when he thought he might learn Spanish but never opened. There were sticky notes throughout it now, marking important pages. Someone had been using this book, really using it. He set it down and looked at the whiteboard. The sentences written there were simple but carefully constructed. "I am proud to be American. I will work hard for my family. Education is important. Where do you get the materials?" Vincent asked. "The notebooks, pencils, all of this?" "I buy them," Lucia said quietly. "With my salary. It's not much, but enough for basics. Sometimes the students bring their own notebooks. We share everything." Vincent thought about what he paid Lucia. $15 an hour, which seemed fair for a housekeeper. She worked 40 hours a week, sometimes more. And she was taking that money and buying school supplies for other people. How did this even start? He asked. Lucia sat down in one of the folding chairs, suddenly looking exhausted. 6 months ago, my neighbor Teresa asked me to help her read a letter from her son's school. She was so worried because she couldn't understand it. I translated for her. Then another neighbor asked for help. Then another. Pretty soon I was helping 5 or 6 people every week, meeting at the park or at someone's small apartment. She looked around the room, but it wasn't enough space and we couldn't focus with kids running around or traffic noise. One day I was here cleaning this big living room and I just thought, what if we met here, just once to try it? And it worked so well. People could focus. They could learn. So we kept doing it. The young woman who'd been packing her bag spoke up. Miss Lucia changed my life. I passed my citizenship test last month because of her. I'm going to be an American citizen next week. Her eyes were bright with tears. My children will grow up with a mother who is a citizen. That means everything to me. Others started sharing too. The man in the fast food uniform had gotten promoted to assistant manager because his English improved. An older woman had finally been able to talk to her doctor without a translator. A middle-aged man had passed his driver's license test on the first try because Lucia helped him read the manual. Vincent felt overwhelmed by all of it. His mind was racing, trying to fit together what he'd discovered with what he'd always believed about his life. He was successful. He'd built something important. He donated to charities, wrote checks to good causes, but somehow his housekeeper was doing more good with his empty living room than he'd ever done with his millions. "Mr. Chambers," Lucia said, standing up again. "I will leave now. I will never come back. But please, please don't be angry at these people. They did nothing wrong. This was all my idea, my fault. They just wanted to learn." Vincent looked at her face, really looked at it. He'd seen this woman almost every day for 5 years, but had he ever really seen her? She was just the person who cleaned, who restocked his fridge, who made sure his house was perfect. He'd never asked about her life, her dreams, her family. He didn't even know if she had children. "How old are you, Lucia?" he asked suddenly. She looked confused by the question. 47. Do you have kids?" 2. A son who's 25 and a daughter who's 22. Both born here. Both went to college. Pride filled her voice. "My son is an accountant. My daughter is a nurse, and you made that happen," Vincent said. "Working as a housekeeper, you put 2 kids through college." Lucia nodded. "It wasn't easy, but I wanted them to have more opportunities than I had. I came here when I was 19 with nothing. No English, no education, nothing. I cleaned houses so my children could have better lives." She gestured to the class. Now I want to help others have that chance too. Vincent walked to the window and looked out at his perfectly manicured lawn, his expensive cars, his life of privilege that he'd always taken for granted. Then he turned back to face the room full of people who were still watching him nervously, waiting to see what he would do. "Lucia," he said slowly, "you're not fired." A collective breath seemed to release in the room. "But," he continued, "we need to talk about how this is going to work from now on." Lucia looked confused. "Work? I don't understand." Vincent surprised himself by smiling. "Well, if you're going to run a school in my house, we should probably do it right." The confusion on Lucia's face was almost funny. She stood there, mouth slightly open, clearly trying to figure out if Vincent was serious or setting up some kind of trap. "I don't understand, Mr. Chambers," she finally said. "You want us to keep using your house?" "Not exactly," Vincent said, and he watched hope fade from her eyes. "I mean, yes, but not like this. Not sneaking around. Not you buying supplies with your own money. Not sitting on cheap folding chairs in a room that wasn't designed for teaching." He looked around at the makeshift classroom. "If we're going to do this, let's do it properly." An older woman in the back raised her hand tentatively, like a real student. "Sir, what do you mean by properly?" Vincent realized he didn't really know yet. The idea was forming in his mind even as he spoke. "I mean real desks, better materials, maybe actual teachers to help Lucia. A schedule that works for everyone." He paused. "I travel all the time anyway. This house just sits empty. We might as well use it for something that matters." The room erupted in whispers. People were looking at each other, unsure if they'd heard correctly. Lucia just stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Mr. Chambers," she said carefully, "are you feeling okay? Did something happen on your trip? Because this doesn't sound like you." Vincent almost laughed. She was right. This didn't sound like him at all. The old him would have fired her, maybe called his lawyer, definitely changed all the locks. But standing here, seeing what she'd built with nothing but determination and borrowed space, something had shifted inside him. "Maybe I'm not okay," he admitted. "Or maybe I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time in a long time. Look, can everyone stay for a bit? I want to understand more about what you're trying to accomplish here." The young mother with the small child spoke up nervously. "Sir, I need to pick up my older kids from school in an hour." "That's fine," Vincent said. "Whatever time you have." He grabbed one of the folding chairs and sat down backwards on it, facing the class. "Tell me what you need. What would help you most?" At first, nobody wanted to speak. They all looked at Lucia, who still seemed stunned. Finally, the man who'd talked about not being able to read at his grandson's school cleared his throat. "More time," he said simply. "We only meet once a week for 2 hours. It's not enough to really learn. But everyone works so much, it's hard to find time." "I need help with writing," another woman added. "Speaking is getting better, but writing is still so hard. All the grammar rules, the spelling. My boss wants me to write emails, but I'm too scared I'll make mistakes." "Computer skills," someone else called out. "Everything is online now. Job applications, everything. But I don't know how to use computers well." Vincent pulled out his phone and started making notes. "Okay, what else?" The stories came faster now. A young man needed help preparing for the GED test because he dropped out of high school to help his family. A woman wanted to learn medical terminology because she worked in a hospital cafeteria, but dreamed of being a nurse's aide. An older gentleman needed help with the citizenship test, but was terrified of the interview portion because he got nervous speaking English in formal situations. With each story, Vincent's understanding grew. These weren't people looking for handouts. They were people willing to work incredibly hard for a chance at something better. They just needed doors to open, doors that money and privilege had always held open for him without him even noticing. After about 45 minutes, people started to leave. They had other jobs to get to, children to pick up, responsibilities that couldn't wait. They thanked Vincent quietly, almost disbelievingly as they filed out. Some looked like they expected him to change his mind at any moment. Soon it was just Vincent and Lucia in the living room, surrounded by the evidence of her secret school. She started folding up the chairs, moving efficiently like she always did. "Leave those," Vincent said. "Sit down. We need to talk." Lucia sat, her hands folded in her lap, still looking like she expected the worst. "Why didn't you just ask me?" Vincent asked. "If you'd told me what you wanted to do, maybe I would have said yes." Lucia gave him a look that was almost pitying. Mr. Chambers, with respect, you don't even know my last name. In 5 years, you've never asked where I'm from, if I have family, what I do when I'm not cleaning your house. You're not a bad man, but you live in a different world than us. I didn't think you would understand. The words stung because they were true. Vincent thought back over the years. Had he ever had a real conversation with Lucia? Had he ever seen her as more than just the person who cleaned his house? You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry for that, but I want to do better now. I want to help make this work. Lucia studied his face for a long moment. Why? What changed? Vincent wasn't sure how to explain it. I've spent 20 years building a company, making money, being successful. And I thought that was enough. I donate to charity. I write checks. But watching you teach those people, seeing how much it meant to them, I realized something. I've been rich in money but poor in purpose. He stood up and walked around the room, looking at the whiteboard, the books, the evidence of real learning happening. You're doing something that actually changes lives. That woman who passed her citizenship test, the guy who got promoted, they'll remember you forever. What will people remember about me? That I had a big house and a successful company? Mr. Chambers, Lucia said gently, your company employs thousands of people. That's important too. Maybe, Vincent said. But this feels different. This feels personal, real. He turned to face her. I want to help. Really help. Not just throw money at it, but actually be involved. Will you let me? Lucia was quiet for a moment. What exactly are you thinking? Vincent's mind was already racing with possibilities. First, we fix this space. Get proper furniture, better lighting, a real teacher's desk. Then we set up a regular schedule. Maybe 3 times a week instead of once. We get more teachers to help you. Professionals who know what they're doing. Mr. Chambers, that sounds expensive. I have a 15-bedroom house that I live in alone, Vincent said. Expensive isn't the problem. The problem is I've been wasting all this space and opportunity, while people who actually need it have been struggling. But what about when you're home? We can't just take over your house whenever we want. Vincent thought about it. The pool house. It's just sitting there full of storage I don't need. We could convert it into a real classroom. Separate entrance, its own space. That way it doesn't matter if I'm home or not. Lucia's eyes went wide. You would do that, really? I want to, Vincent said, and he realized he meant it. But I need your help. You know these people, you know what they need. I just have the resources. For the first time since he'd walked in, Lucia smiled. A real, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. I think, Mr. Chambers, this might be the craziest thing I've ever heard, but also maybe the best. There's one more thing, Vincent said. If you're going to run this program, actually run it properly. You can't be cleaning my house at the same time. I want to hire you as the director. Triple your current salary. You focus on teaching and organizing. I'll hire someone else to clean. Lucia stood up so fast her chair almost fell over. Triple? Mr. Chambers, that's too much. It's not enough, Vincent said. You've been changing lives with nothing but borrowed books and folding chairs. Imagine what you could do with actual support. Tears started rolling down Lucia's cheeks. She tried to wipe them away, but they kept coming. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Vincent said. Say you'll help me turn this into something real. Lucia looked around the living room at the space where she'd been secretly teaching for 6 months. Then she looked at Vincent, really looked at him, maybe for the first time as something other than just her employer. Yes, she said, her voice strong despite the tears. Yes, I'll help you. Vincent felt something he hadn't felt in years. Excitement. Real, genuine excitement about a project that wasn't about profits or stock prices or market share. This was about people. Real people with real dreams. Okay then, he said, pulling out his phone. Let's get started. First thing Monday, we're meeting with a contractor about the pool house. Then we're going shopping for furniture and supplies. And Lucia, don't hold back. Get whatever you think we need. As Lucia started making her own lists, talking about lesson plans and schedules and ideas she'd had for months but couldn't implement, Vincent realized something. He'd come home early by accident, discovered something he wasn't supposed to see, and somehow stumbled into the most important thing he'd done in years. Sometimes the best changes in life weren't planned. Sometimes they just happened when you were paying attention to the right things. And for the first time in a very long time, Vincent felt like he was finally paying attention to what really mattered. 3 weeks later, Vincent stood in what used to be his pool house watching contractors install the last row of overhead lights. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a dusty storage space full of old furniture and boxes was now a bright, clean classroom with 20 proper desks, a large whiteboard, and shelves lined with brand-new textbooks. "It's really happening," Lucia said beside him, her voice full of wonder. She ran her hand along one of the desks. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real." Vincent smiled. The past 3 weeks had been the busiest and strangest of his life. Instead of flying to board meetings and investor conferences, he'd been meeting with contractors, shopping for supplies, and learning about educational programs. His assistant had been completely confused when he canceled a trip to New York to stay home and oversee the renovation. "The computers arrive tomorrow," he said, checking his phone. 10 laptops all set up with educational software, and I found a retired English teacher, Mrs. Chen, who's willing to volunteer 3 afternoons a week. Lucia's eyes went wide. "Mrs. Chen? From the adult school program that closed last year? I heard she was wonderful." "That's her. She's excited to get back to teaching. Said she was going crazy with retirement." Vincent put his phone away. "We're also getting a tutoring program set up for one-on-one help with citizenship tests." The contractor, a friendly guy named Tony, walked over wiping his hands on his pants. "That should do it, Mr. Chambers. We're all finished here. You've got yourself a proper classroom now." "Thank you, Tony. Send me the final bill." After Tony left, Vincent and Lucia stood in the empty classroom. Through the window, Vincent could see his main house, the mansion he'd bought years ago as a symbol of his success. Funny how this small converted pool house felt more important than all those empty bedrooms. "So when do we start?" Vincent asked. "Monday," Lucia said. "I've been calling everyone from the old class, plus word has spread. We might have 30 people show up for the first session." 30? The room only fits 20 comfortably. "I know. We might need to do 2 sessions. Morning and evening, maybe." Vincent made a mental note. 2 sessions meant more volunteer teachers, more supplies, more coordination. But seeing the excitement on Lucia's face made it all worth it. The first Monday class was chaos in the best possible way. 34 people showed up, ranging from teenagers to folks in their 70s. Some brought their children because they had no childcare. The classroom that had seemed spacious suddenly felt cramped. But nobody complained. If anything, people seemed thrilled just to be there. Vincent had planned to just observe from the back, but within minutes he found himself helping. A young man named Carlos couldn't get his computer to turn on. An older woman needed help finding the bathroom. 2 teenagers were arguing in Spanish about where to sit. "Mr. Chambers," Lucia called out over the noise, "can you help hand out these workbooks?" And just like that, Vincent found himself actually teaching, or trying to anyway. He worked with a small group practicing pronunciation, feeling completely out of his depth. These people knew he was the millionaire who owned the property, but they treated him like any other volunteer, correcting his explanations when he got grammar rules wrong. No, a woman named Isabel told him patiently. "You say I have been here, not I am been here." "Present perfect, not present continuous," Vincent laughed. "You're right. I stand corrected." Mrs. Chen, the retired teacher, was a godsend. She moved through the room with the confidence of someone who'd done this for decades, answering questions, encouraging shy students, keeping everyone on task. By the end of the 2-hour session, Vincent was exhausted but energized in a way he'd never felt after a business meeting. As people filed out, many stopped to thank them. Some brought homemade food as gifts. One man tried to give Vincent $20 for the electric bill, which Vincent politely refused. "Same time Wednesday?" a teenager asked hopefully. "Same time Wednesday," Lucia confirmed. After everyone left, Vincent helped clean up while Lucia organized materials for the next session. "That was intense," he said. "That was wonderful," Lucia corrected. "Did you see how focused everyone was? How hard they were trying?" Vincent had seen. He'd also seen how many people they'd had to turn away because there wasn't enough room. "We need more space. Maybe we could use part of the main house too." "Are you sure? That's your personal space." "It's just space," Vincent said, "and we're going to need it." Over the next month, the program grew faster than either of them had anticipated. Word spread through the community like wildfire. The maid who worked 2 houses down told her cousin. The gardener mentioned it to other landscapers. Someone posted about it on a community Facebook group, and Vincent's phone started ringing with requests for information. They expanded to 4 sessions a week, then 5. Vincent converted one of his downstairs guest rooms into a smaller classroom for one-on-one tutoring. He hired 2 part-time teachers to help Lucia manage the growing number of students. His house, once silent and empty, now buzzed with activity and life. But success brought challenges. Some neighbors started complaining about the increased traffic and parking on the street. Vincent's homeowners association sent him a stern letter about running a business in a residential zone. One particularly angry neighbor even threatened to call the city. "Maybe we should slow down," Lucia suggested one evening after a difficult day of dealing with complaints. "We don't want to cause problems." Vincent was frustrated but determined. "No, we're doing something good here. There has to be a way to make this work properly." He spent the next week meeting with lawyers, city officials, and community leaders. He learned about zoning laws, educational permits, and nonprofit organizations. It turned out that if they set up the Learning Center as a proper nonprofit educational organization, many of the legal concerns would disappear. "It's going to take some time," his lawyer explained. "Paperwork, approvals, establishing a board of directors. But it's doable." "How much time?" 3 to 6 months, probably. Vincent made the decision quickly. "Do it, whatever it takes. And while we're at it, let's make this bigger. If we're going to do all that paperwork anyway, let's set up something that can expand beyond just my property." That night, he sat down with Lucia at his kitchen table, the same table where he usually ate takeout alone while checking emails. Now it was covered with plans and documents. "I want to set up a foundation," Vincent said. "The Lucia Learning Foundation." "No," Lucia said immediately. "Absolutely not. This is your project, your money. But it's your vision, your heart. You're the one who started this, who believed in these people when nobody else did." Vincent pushed the papers toward her. "Besides, I'm terrible at naming things. My company is literally called Chambers Tech. Not very creative." Lucia laughed despite herself. "What about the Vincent and Lucia Foundation? Better. See, you're already better at this than me." They talked for hours that night, planning not just for the program at Vincent's house, but for other potential locations. Maybe they could partner with community centers, churches, schools. Maybe they could create a model that other people could replicate. The possibilities seemed endless. 6 weeks after that first chaotic Monday class, something remarkable happened. The young woman who'd been studying for her citizenship test, the one with the small child, passed her interview. She came to class that Wednesday with tears streaming down her face, waving her approval letter. "I did it. I'm going to be a citizen. An American citizen." The entire class erupted in applause. People were hugging her, crying with her, celebrating like it was their own victory, and in a way it was. Every person in that room was working toward their own dreams, their own goals, and seeing someone succeed gave them hope. Vincent watched from the corner of the room, and he felt his own throat get tight with emotion. This woman had worked 2 jobs while raising kids, had studied late at night after everyone else was asleep, had pushed through fear and doubt. And now she was going to be a citizen of the country she'd chosen as her home. "Can you believe this?" Lucia asked. 8 months ago, I was sneaking people into your house, terrified you'd find out. Now we're talking about opening centers across the city." Vincent laughed. 8 months ago, I was a workaholic who didn't know his housekeeper's last name. Now she's my business partner and one of my best friends. "Martinez," Lucia said with a smile. "My last name is Martinez." "I know that now," Vincent said. "Along with your kids' names, your favorite food, your mother's recipe for tamales, and approximately 1,000,000 other things I should have known years ago." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking at what they'd built together. "You know what's funny?" Vincent said. "I spent 20 years building a company, thinking that was my legacy. But this feels like what I was supposed to do all along." "Your company is important too," Lucia said. "You employ thousands of people, create technology that helps people." "Maybe, but it's not the same." When Carlos told his story tonight, when that little girl called her mother a hero, that meant something different. Vincent struggled to find the words. The company was always about being successful. This is about helping people succeed. "There's a difference," Lucia nodded. "You know what I realized? When I was doing this secretly, I was helping people, but I was doing it alone, in the shadows, always afraid. Now we're doing it together, in the open, and it's reaching so many more people." She smiled. "Sometimes asking for help is the bravest thing you can do." Vincent thought about that. He'd built his entire life on being self-sufficient. not needing anyone, solving every problem alone. But this project had taught him something different. The best things happened when people worked together, when they combined their strengths and supported each other's weaknesses. His phone buzzed. It was an email from someone who'd heard about the foundation and wanted to donate money to open a center in San Diego. The ripple effect was already starting. "We're going to need more teachers," Vincent said, showing Lucia the email. "And more volunteers. More supplies, more space." Lucia's eyes were bright with possibility. This could really be something big. "It already is something big," Vincent said. "We've helped over 200 people in 8 months. People who are building better lives for themselves and their families. People who are contributing to their communities. That's huge." "You're right," Lucia said. She looked around the classroom one more time. "You know, when I started teaching in your living room, I just wanted to help a few neighbors. I never imagined it would become this." "That's how the best things start," Vincent said. "Not with a grand plan, but with one person caring enough to do something." They turned off the lights and walked back toward the main house. Through the windows, Vincent could see volunteers cleaning up from the ceremony. His house, which had once been a symbol of his isolation and excess, was now the heart of something that mattered. "So what's next?" Lucia asked. Vincent smiled. "More of this. Help the mayor set up those new centers. Keep teaching our students. Maybe start a scholarship fund for students who want to go to college." He paused. "Whatever comes, we'll figure it out together." As they walked through the door, Vincent realized something. He'd spent years searching for happiness and success, in achievement, in accumulating wealth and status. But happiness had been waiting here all along, in the simple act of helping others reach for their dreams. He'd come home early 8 months ago and couldn't believe what his maid had done. Now he couldn't believe what they'd done together. And the best part was they were just getting started. The little classroom that started with folding chairs and borrowed books had become something neither of them could have imagined. Not just a school, but a community. Not just a program, but a movement. Not just a change in one house, but a change in hundreds of lives. And it had all started because someone cared enough to try, and someone else cared enough to listen. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. One person with a dream. And another person willing to help make it real.